evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Thursday, with more on today's developments on the economy and the markets. Then 3 political takes. The presidential candidates continue to make their case. The humor side with Lorne Michaels and Seth Meyers, live from New York. And the young voter story. Plus, back to the economy, a Paul Salmon conversation about the Great Depression.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
Pacific Life has been the power behind successful individuals for more than 140 years. Pacific Life's strength includes assets exceeding $100 billion. So when it comes to planning for retirement, your financial professional and Pacific Life can help you reach your goals. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
With soaring energy prices and global climate change, there are good reasons for believing in wind. Wind energy is clean and plentiful, and it answers the call for sustainable ways to create the electricity we need. We know because our sole focus is developing technology that uses the energy of the wind to generate electricity. America has some of the world's most abundant wind resources, and Vestas is here to help harness them.
Chevron.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The U.S. economy today gave the clearest sign yet it's moving into recession. The Commerce Department reported economic activity fell in the third quarter for the first time since 2001. The gross domestic product was down 0.3% from July through September. Consumer spending was a driving force behind that downturn. It fell more than 3%, the most in 28 years. The GDP number was actually better than expected, but the president's top economic advisor, Edward Lazier, said there's no question the economy has gotten significantly weaker.
We believe that we're going to see a few tough months ahead, but we are trying to take the steps that will help the next administration start off on the right foot, and we think that it is realistic to think that sometime early in the term of the next president, we can start to see solid growth again.
Lazier also defended the federal rescue plan against criticism of how some banks are using the funds. So far, the Treasury has committed $160 billion to buy stakes in banks to get them lending again. But the Washington Post and others reported more than half the money will go to pay dividends over the next 3 years. Lazier said the government is watching closely to make sure there are not abuses. Wall Street mostly shook off the day's economic news and focused instead on worldwide cuts in interest rates. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained more than 189 points to close above 9180. The NASDAQ rose 41 points to close at 1698. Stock markets in Asia also scored big gains. Indexes across Europe were up too, but not by much. American Express announced today it's cutting 7,000 jobs in the face of falling earnings. That's about 10% of the credit card and financial service firm's global workforce. But oil giant ExxonMobil posted another record profit of nearly $15 billion in the third quarter. The price of oil peaked during that period before falling sharply. The governors of 6 states appealed today for immediate action to help automakers. They warned of unmanageable disaster without it. The warnings came from the governors of Delaware, Kentucky, Michigan, New York, Ohio, and South Dakota. They wrote to Treasury Secretary Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke. The government of Japan announced an economic stimulus package of $275 billion today. The Prime Minister said it's essential to boost the world's second largest economy.
現在の経済は The current state of the economy is like being hit by a tempest that comes once in 100 years. The economy was hit by a tempest that started from the U.S. The Japanese government will tackle this with all its efforts, and we hope to gain the understanding of all the Japanese people.
Under the plan, all Japanese families receive cash payments and small businesses get loans and tax credits. The U.S. presidential candidates focused on the economic news with just 5 days to go. Republican John McCain campaigned across Ohio. He cited ExxonMobil's record profits, and he criticized Democrat Barack Obama for backing tax breaks for oil companies. Obama traveled from Florida to Virginia to Missouri. He said bad news about the economy would only continue under McCain. We'll have more on the campaign later in the program. Rebels in Congo today demanded direct talks with the government. A fragile ceasefire held as UN and African leaders tried to prevent another all-out war. The rebels were poised outside the eastern city of Goma, where UN peacekeepers patrolled. We have a report from Jonathan Miller of Independent Television News, who's just outside Goma tonight.
Today we drove 4 hours from Kigali, the Rwandan capital, west towards the Congolese frontier, and all the way we were going against the flow. There were aid agency convoys heading the other way. When we made it down to the border, we were met by people who just come from the other side, and they said, look, it's not safe to cross. There's a widespread fear tonight of the looting and the mayhem that took place last night under cover of darkness. Goma tonight is a city under siege. It is quiet but edgy, and someone I spoke to who just left the city tonight said it had the sense of a place about to blow. I'm standing right on the border now, and I've been in touch with a Congolese government soldier who is just about 50 kilometers south of Goma, and he says the belief of the Congolese military is that the forces of Laurent Nkunda, the Tutsi warlord who has led this rebellion, have now completely surrounded and infiltrated Goma. Laurent Nkunda has today said that he will enter the city unless he can get a guarantee from UN peacekeepers inside Goma that they will ensure a ceasefire and security. Now, he says that he wants to talk, but the likelihood is the government of Congo will not want to do this. It won't want to negotiate down the barrel of a gun. All this means government forces still in the city are very, very jumpy. They still control the airport, but once Nkunda enters the city, they'll have nowhere left to run, and certainly they won't be running across into Rwanda, which has been again accused today by Congo of backing the rebels. Now, while all this has been going on, a humanitarian disaster has been unfolding with 200,000 extra displaced people to add to more than 1 million already on the move because of fighting.
The European Commission said today it's sending $5 million in aid for the refugees in Congo, and the UN asked for reinforcements to support its 17,000 troops there, its largest peacekeeping mission in the world. Taliban fighters attacked a government building in the capital of Afghanistan today, killing at least 5 people. They shot their way into the Ministry of Culture in Kabul. One of them blew himself up. In addition to the dead, more than 20 people were wounded. Afghan President Karzai said the attack was meant to undermine efforts to hold talks with the Taliban. The city of Philadelphia today celebrated its first professional sports championship in a quarter century. The Philadelphia Phillies won the World Series last night 4-3 over Tampa Bay. Afterward, thousands of fans poured into the streets. Most of the celebration was peaceful, but police did arrest 76 people. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now, financial matters. The candidates' words of the day, humor on late-night television, young voters, and the Great Depression. Those new signs that a recession is underway. Jeffrey Brown has our economy update.
As the consumer goes, so goes the economy. That was true in the good times, and now as the consumer goes not well at all, it is a clear indication that bad times are indeed upon us. With me to go over today's numbers is New York Times economics columnist David Leonhardt. Welcome.
Thank you.
You wrote today that the longest American shopping spree on record is over.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's in many ways today's report was the end of an era. Dating all the way back to the early 90s, consumers have increased their spending every single quarter. They did it through the recession of 2001. They did it even as incomes were not growing very quickly during this recent expansion. And they did it in many ways by taking out more debt. And that debt is behind a lot of this housing crisis. And
that propped us up. That propped us up over the last few years.
That's
as well,
right. That's right. In some ways, you can think about it as we were stealing from future consumption over the past decade, and now we pay the price for that. Right. Some forms of debt are great. You can go to college, you can buy a car, but some forms are less good. And so what we now see is a very sharp pullback by the consumer. As Jim mentioned, it was the biggest decline in consumer spending in almost 30 years, and it's not clear exactly when that's going to end.
And that helped pull, of course, the whole economy down, and now we have the drop in GDP. What else can you read out of today's numbers? There were also jobless claims.
That's right. So far, what the story has really been about the financial crisis, dating all the way back to last August, more than a year now. I think the story is starting to shift a little bit. I think it's going to shift from the financial crisis, assuming that crisis doesn't get worse, to really the household sector. And we're going to see increasing job cuts, and we're going to see incomes failing to keep pace with inflation. And that jobs report that you mentioned today is weekly jobless claims. They're very high. They're really at a recession level.
People have been talking for weeks and some for months about whether we are, in fact, in a recession. Today's news would give more credence to that notion, correct?
Yes, we are in a recession. It's almost certain. I talked to Robert Gordon, a Northwestern University economist recently, who's on the committee that officially decides, and he said we're clearly in a recession. I think the other committee members will agree with me when we meet. The only question is really, when did it start? Did it start at the beginning of this year or the middle of this year?
Because they go by this definition usually of 2 bad quarters in a row.
2 bad quarters is actually sort of the layman's definition. The official one is a pronounced, protracted, widespread decline in economic activity.
In the eyes of this committee.
In the eyes of this committee, and we all sort of accept its definitions. It's used by politicians and in the media. And so obviously the big question is not so much when it began for the ordinary person, but when does it end?
Now, you get bad news like this today, and yet the markets were up.
Right.
Confusing people yet again.
Right.
Why should this be different from other days, I suppose? One reason that was cited was, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as we thought.
Right. It was marginally better than we thought. And I think in some ways the more important thing is that at a moment like this, people are fearing that there's something they don't know. And so I think it was actually a bigger deal that it was no worse than people thought than that it was marginally better. It's a relief. And so people look at this report and they say, wow, there isn't some other scary economic thing out there that we didn't know about that we've just learned about. Although I think, as the economist at Goldman Sachs said, this report was not as good as the market reaction implied. The economy is really not strong right now, and this report confirmed that.
Well, I wondered, another way of thinking about these things sometimes is the GDP numbers look backwards.
Yeah.
They're looking back a few months, whereas markets, we're always told, are trying to predict the future.
That's right. And I think there's many people in the markets now who feel like the markets have overshot and that the stock market is very cheap. I think when you look at it historically, the market is actually just about average priced. And so I think people shouldn't have too high expectations about where it goes from here. I think it could go higher, it could go lower, but I don't think actually the market is cheap. I think what we've seen over the last few days is some sense in the market that maybe the declines had gone too far, too fast.
Now, there is continuing talk about a potential government plan to step in to help troubled homeowners.
Yes.
We talked about it on the program the other night about the various proposals that are out there. Any news on where that plan stands?
Well, the government isn't coming forward very quickly with details on the plan. They keep inching a little bit more out and saying, we'll give you more soon. It seems to be that the FDIC, the agency that insures bank deposits, is pushing this, and that the Treasury and the White House are a little bit more resistant to it. There's no question that the Treasury and the White House have been behind the curve in responding to this crisis. And so I think to some extent they no longer get the benefit of the doubt. But I also think they're doing something important here. Coming up with a bailout for homeowners is fantastically difficult. It introduces all sorts of potentially dangerous incentives in which people who wouldn't otherwise lose their homes would in fact get an incentive to stop paying their mortgage.
It's very hard to get it right.
It's very hard to get it right. And so the fact that the administration and the Treasury are pushing to make sure the details of this are going to be okay, I actually think is quite important.
One last thing, and also Jim mentioned it in our news summary, is this question of banks that took money, have taken money in the rescue plan, and the reports are that they're not using it for loans. In fact, they're giving it out in dividends to shareholders. How much of a stir do you feel that is causing, even political resentment out there over the way this is developing?
I think it's going to depend on a great degree on where this goes from here. The credit crisis has actually eased just a little bit in the last couple weeks. If that keeps happening, I think people aren't going to be worried so much about whether this dollar went to dividends or went to new loans. But if it doesn't ease, then it's really going to look once again like the latest plan that the Treasury has come up with isn't quite the right plan, and it's going to have to shift again. Now, even if that's the case, the good news is 5 days from now, we're going to have a new administration coming in, and we're going to have a whole injection of fresh blood, whether it's a McCain administration or an Obama administration. And the story is going to start to change pretty quickly.
One way or another, this is falling to whoever's next, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, David Leonhardt of the New York Times. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
And now to that presidential race with just 5 days to go. Ray Suarez has our campaign report.
Barack Obama bounced across battleground states today. First up, Florida.
How's everybody doing, Florida?
Part of Obama's closing argument in Florida and elsewhere includes a pair of new television ads. One touts his support from Republicans like Warren Buffett and Colin Powell. The other suggests John McCain would just duplicate the economic policies of President Bush.
Wonder where John McCain would take the economy? Look behind you. John McCain wants to continue George Bush's economic policies.
Obama played off the ad at a rally in Sarasota this morning.
If you want to know where John McCain will drive this economy, just look in the rearview mirror. Because when it comes to our economic policies, John McCain has been right next to George Bush. He's been sitting there in the passenger seat ready to take over every step of the way. Voting for the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy that he once said he opposed. Voting for the Bush budgets that sent us reeling into huge deficits and huge debt. Calling for less and less regulation. 21 times just this year. In fact, after 21 months and 3 debates, John McCain has still not been able to tell the American people a single major thing that he would do differently from George Bush when it comes to the economy. Think about it. Think about it. You know his attacks on me, but you have no idea how he would do anything differently from George Bush because he doesn't have any ideas that are different from George Bush when it comes to the economy. So you've got to ask yourself, after 9 straight months of job losses, the largest drop in home values on record, wages lower than they've been in a decade, why would we keep driving down this dead-end street?
We need to create wealth in this country. And
John McCain campaigned in another toss-up state, Ohio, where he had 4 events scheduled today. At a morning rally in Defiance, McCain seized on the news that ExxonMobil earned a record profit of nearly $15 billion last quarter, slamming Obama for his past support of an energy bill that included oil industry tax breaks.
today, ExxonMobil reported record profits. Senator Obama voted $4 billion in corporate giveaways to the oil companies. I voted against it. When I'm president, we're not going to let that happen. As I said, we're going to invest in all energy alternatives, nuclear, wind, solar, tide. We'll encourage the manufacture of hybrid, flex fuel, and electric automobiles, and we will restore the automobile industry in America to its preeminent position. We must do that for the future of our children and our grandchildren. And we will lower the cost of energy within months, and we'll create millions of new jobs in America and get this economy out of the ditch.
And last night in West Palm Beach, Florida, McCain went after Obama not on policy, but programming. The Republican dismissed the Obama campaign's primetime infomercial before it even aired, saying the Democrat could afford it only because he opted out of public financing.
Now tonight, you can all look forward to my opponent's performance in a television infomercial. It used to be that only rain or some other act of God could delay the World Series. But I guess the network execs figured an Obama infomercial was close enough.
As with other infomercials, he's got a few things he wants to sell you. He's offering government-run health care, an energy plan guaranteed to work without drilling, and an automatic wealth spreader that folds neatly and fits under any bed. When you're watching this gauzy feel-good commercial, just remember that it was paid for with broken promises. Senator Obama signed a piece of paper committing to public financing of his campaign if I did. Twice, he looked the American people in the eye and said he would sit down with me before he abandoned public financing. He didn't mean a word of it. When it was in his interest to break his promise, he tossed it aside like it didn't mean a thing. He is the first candidate since the Watergate scandal to abandon the public financing system, and his campaign is now being flooded with hundreds of millions of dollars in undisclosed and questionable donations. Right. His campaign has directly profited from his broken promises, and because of that, the American people have to ask, what does the broken promise behind tonight's infomercial say about the value of his other commitments?
We've been talking about the same problems for decades.
The half-hour telecast, called Barack Obama, American Stories, included a mix of Obama appearances, testimonials from supporters, vignettes about average Americans, and ended by cutting live to an Obama event in Florida.
America, the time for change has come. And to all of you, and all of those who've joined us from across the country, in 6 days, we can choose an economy that rewards work and creates jobs and fuels prosperity, starting with the middle class.
The feed aired on 8 broadcast and cable networks, costing the campaign at least $3 million. According to early ratings, approximately 30 million people watched the program. Some 3 hours later, Obama campaigned in Kissimmee, Florida, where he was joined on the trail for the first time by former President Bill Clinton. Obama closed out his night with an appearance on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. The host asked Obama if he was concerned that some Americans would not vote for him because of his race, including Obama himself, since he's half white.
Are you concerned that you may go into the voting booth and
I won't know what to do.
Your white half will all of a sudden decide, I can't do this.
Yeah, it's a problem.
What is it?
I said it's a problem.
Tomorrow, Obama's in Iowa and Indiana. McCain spends the day in Ohio.
And that brings us to tonight's word, humor, and to Judy Woodruff.
Late-night comedy shows have long been places for candidates to be seen and to be skewered, and this year is no exception. Here's a clip from last weekend's Saturday Night Live skit poking fun at Obama's infomercial. It's often play along in person. 2 weeks ago, Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin made a cameo appearance on SNL, prompting the show's highest ratings in 14 years. Here's a clip from that night. Joining me now are someone you just saw in that clip. He's Lorne Michaels, who created Saturday Night Live 34 seasons ago, and he is its longtime executive producer. And actor Seth Meyers. He's been with the program for 8 years, and he's the head writer and anchor of Weekend Update. Thank you both for being with us, and I get my bias on the table right away. I'm a big fan of Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels, to you first. What if John McCain had chosen somebody else, say Tim Pawlenty or Mitt Romney as his running mate?
It would not have been as much fun. I think that we would have dealt with it in the way that we always do, but I think that the choice of Governor Palin was so startling, and that the excitement at that convention, just led to everyone paying attention, and that was really helpful for us.
Why do you think she provides such rich material?
Well, I think because it started fresh. There was no fatigue with her. I mean, everyone got to know her at the same time. There was all those that wild internet, eruptions trying to define her. I think everybody was curious about her. And in our world, most people in the audience had the idea that she should be played by Tina Fey at almost exactly the same time, and started, letting us know that. And I think if we'd used anyone other than Tina, I think the audience would have been disappointed.
Seth Meyers, what makes one politician easier to impersonate and another one harder?
Well, you obviously want hooks, and I think Sarah Palin had a lot of hooks. I mean, she was an unknown, and we learned a lot about her really fast. And she's also charismatic as an individual, and that's more fun for an actor to play than someone who's maybe a more, boring politician. And, with somebody like Tina, who has a great attention to detail, it worked out really well because she found all the sort of idiosyncrasies of the speech patterns. And, as a writing staff, there was plenty to write about. So it really worked out well for us.
And Seth Meyers, what makes this campaign so rich, so ripe with material?
Well, I think that the country's probably a little tired of the current administration in the same way that comedy writers have gotten tired of it as well. You can only make jokes about people for so long before you seem repetitive. And I think this current administration's resistant to change has sort of made them impermeable to comedy recently. So for us as well, I think the American people got really excited about this election, and then they started paying attention to it. And the more they pay attention, the more you can sort of make jokes about the minutia. And, that has sort of played into our hands.
Lorne Michaels, how do you see the role of Saturday Night Live and other comedy shows at a time like this, an election like this one?
Well, we're not on every day, so we have the week to prepare for it, and I think that our job is the show strives to be bipartisan, and I think our job is to go after whatever happened that week, and who's ever in authority, that's who we're looking at. So I think that there are times when I think we've done it more successfully or less successfully, but I think this election, because as Seth said, when you get 80 million people watching a debate, it means that, the country's paying attention, and that just makes what we do easier because we can really jump into it. We don't also have to explain the context.
You said you strive to be bipartisan. Do you feel an obligation to be even-handed?
Yeah, totally. But also, I think that I think that the moment that someone's elected and whoever the new president is, we're in opposition to that. Not in any way in an unpatriotic way, of course, but our job is we're not their friends.
I asked about that because, and let me come back to you, to Seth Meyers on this, because back during the primaries there were when Hillary Clinton was having a tough time against Barack Obama, Amy Poehler played Hillary Clinton, I think, in a fairly sympathetic way, gave the press, I think, a hard time. How much blowback did you get as a result of that?
Well, that was a unique time because, the very next debate, Senator Clinton mentioned us by name, which we never sort of had happen before. But we had, we thought the press had been a little hard on her, and so we actually did a piece sort of more critical of the press than in support of her. But I feel like when a campaign feels something and then they hear someone else say it, they really grab hold of it. That happened in that case. We weren't really picking a side there, but we were trying in that one instance make a case that it seemed like the coverage had been a little unfair. But obviously it was, fun for us to have her mentioned.
And also taking that stance, and dealing with what looked like a swoon on the part of the press for Obama at that time, it didn't mean that we were pro-Hillary. We were just pointing out what seemed obvious to us, and I think that obviously resonated in the Clinton campaign.
Do you think your impersonations can ever do real damage, be hard for a candidate to shake off?
I think that what happens when we do it properly is it starts as an impression and it evolves into a character. I've said this before, but when Dana Carvey used to do the first President Bush, I'd watch him every week, and after a while, when I'd see the President Bush on television, he was somewhat disappointing. And I think the same way with what Daryl has done with President Clinton. They capture some aspect that the audience. Again, the audience wouldn't be laughing if it didn't resonate or didn't strike true. And I think that after a while, you trust those characters, and they speak to the audience.
Is there anything, Seth Meyers, that's off limits? And I'm thinking specifically, Barack Obama's an African American. Do you have to be especially careful in the way you portray him?
Well, I think the most off-limits thing for us is probably, family members of campaigns. That's something that's always tricky on how to handle. And, I think race is as sensitive on our show as it is everywhere in the media. But we haven't run into too many problems with it yet, certainly.
And I think, the essence of the campaign has been the McCain campaign trying to define Obama, Obama trying to define himself. And I think whoever becomes, if Obama becomes president, I think by definition he would reveal more and more of himself. And I think we would find the ways in which, to be funny about that.
What are you going to use for material after the election?
We're going to...
a lot of jokes about the economy. We're hoping that holds up.
We're going to jump right on the economy, I think. No, I think that, again, it only begins the day after Election Day, and there's we've been on for 34 seasons. There's always something. And you never know. In 2000, we were held over for, a couple months, so it doesn't look like that's going to happen this time, but you never know.
Seth Meyers, anything to add?
Yeah, well, it'll certainly be fun for us. I mean, look, everybody loves a contest, and it's been a great contest so far. And I think when one person wins, we'll probably turn the focus back onto the final days of the Bush presidency. So. Yeah,
and also I think that this Saturday, because it's our last show before the election, I think that there's I think we're going to pretty much go all out on it. So.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're going to have a lot of fans watching from around here. And I'm asking what you're going to do about after the election because we at the NewsHour are asking that question, too.
Yeah, no, and it will be our first week off in a long time. We're not on the following weekend, and I know everyone's really looking forward to that here. I don't know whether you guys get the same break.
We're going to keep going.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Good luck.
We'll keep watching. Thank you.
All right. Lauren Michaels, Seth Meyers, thank you both.
And now to our third political story of the night, the serious business of the youth vote in the battleground state of Virginia. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman reports.
Democrat Barack Obama continues to lead in the polls in the battleground state of Virginia and has said if he wins it, he'll win the presidency. On Tuesday, his 9th campaign trip to the state took him to the campus of James Madison University in Virginia's conservative central region. He talked about being inspired by young voters.
In this campaign, I've had the privilege of witnessing what's best in America. I've seen it in lines of voters that stretched around schools and churches. I've seen it in all the young people who cast their ballot for the very first time. And those
young people seem to be plentiful at every Obama rally. We talked to some before Obama spoke in Leesburg, Virginia last week. Lauren Masterson is 24.
We see ourselves in him, I think. Even though he is of another generation, people are excited about him because he seems to understand young people.
Brianna Davenport is 18.
So I just think that Barack, like his plans and his goals, I actually think that they will make a difference.
And 23-year-old Evan Loudenbach talked about the Iraq War and Obama.
That he's always opposed the war. With McCain, McCain's gone with the war, voted with it. So that definitely strikes a chord.
Good to be here with you today, Virginia. Thank you.
When Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin came to Central Virginia on Monday, young supporters such as 20-year-old Trevor Mueller talked excitedly about John McCain.
more people I know are voting than I've known before. Because most of my friends now are 18, 20, 22, and they're actually all going out to vote.
Kara Snodgrass is 23.
But unfortunately, too many people in the younger generation, like young and enthusiastic in playing basketball, they won't take the time to sit down and look at the issues. And unfortunately, I think my wayward friends tend to see Obama as this great change, and he talks about change, but he has yet to tell me or anyone else in my circle of friends what that change is going to dictate.
20-year-old Katie Swartz also sounds energized by McCain and Palin.
I'm a huge person for pro-life. I've always believed in it, and I really like their stand on that.
Like the rest of the electorate, young people here in Virginia and nationwide are showing record levels of interest in this presidential race. But any candidate who counts on the votes of young adults faces both opportunity and obstacles. In the last two presidential elections, less than half of eligible adults under 30 voted. That's a 20-point lower participation rate than those over 30.
You can vote in person, absentee, Monday through Saturday. You can go and vote in person, and they'll be able to help you out even without your voter registration card.
Grant Herring knows it's hard to raise turnout among young voters. He's the leader of Campus Young Democrats at George Mason University in Northern Virginia. For weeks, the group has tried to help students navigate the often confusing maze of registration, early voting, and where to go on Election Day. Some are among the well over 200,000 new 18 to 29-year-olds who have registered in Virginia just this year.
Get in the mail tonight because I know you're a Virginia Beach voter, so.
But I've been going back and forth between the two addresses according to
The Young Democrats have contacted many hundreds of potential voters.
I gotta get to class. Sorry.
But Herring wouldn't predict how many will make it to the campus polling place next Tuesday.
I don't want to give you an exact number and have you come back and talk to me on election night and say where are all the voters. But
it's very difficult to expand the electorate. It's very difficult to go out and get people who are not normally engaged in the political process to register and then vote on Election Day.
George Mason political science professor Michael McDonald says despite a sharp increase in political activity on campus, most of it for Obama, getting young people, especially first-timers, to vote is fraught with difficulty.
We look at the hurdles that are in place for somebody who's never voted before, and there are many. One of them is registration. The other hurdle that you have to jump over is the actual process of voting. And particularly for young people who are at a college, they may have to cast an absentee ballot. They're going to have to go through the whole procedure of requesting that absentee ballot and then returning it. That can be very difficult for some people who've never been through the whole process.
This is one of 50 offices the Obama campaign has opened in battleground Virginia, compared to 20 for John McCain. The well-financed operation includes an internet component relied on by the campaign.
This is not only a place for people to share ideas, but it becomes an organizing tool.
Such advantages have helped Obama build a 20 percentage point polling lead over McCain among 18 to 29-year-olds in Virginia and nationwide. Spokesman Brent Colburn says the campaign has gained experience at guiding new voters of any age.
It's been a long primary season for the Democrats leading up to this general election, and one of the things that afforded us was a chance to look at how we did do with newer voters, how we did do with students. And we've been through this process of registering and mobilizing before. And what we've seen is that this energy really does translate into votes.
The main audience for this blog is undecided. It's people who are not sure, or basically even shoring up the base.
Back on the campus at George Mason University, Josh St. Louis, head of the college Republicans, said his group is less interested in bringing in new young voters.
We made the decision not to register people because, frankly, we thought our resources and our manpower would be better utilized elsewhere, mainly off campus. And it's true that it's very impressive they are registering. I'm still a little skeptical to see if they will turn out.
The Republican Party in Virginia typically maintains high levels of registration throughout the year, and the party has a long-standing reputation for successfully turning them out on Election Day. Still, St. Louis admits Obama's lead in the polls may keep some young Republicans away.
I know a few people personally who aren't voting this year because they feel it's such an uphill battle. I'm working every day to try to convince them elsewise.
The McCain campaign's national headquarters is located in Virginia, and here the outlook is more upbeat. Like the Democrats, the campaign is banking on the internet to reach young voters. And Mike Ginsberg of the Young Republican Federation says web-based efforts finally may yield rewards this year.
In the past, it has been perhaps more hype than actually pans out on Election Day, but with new technology and new ways of communicating, that may change this year. It's hard to say, but certainly we are doing what we can to make sure that we use those new technologies to get folks, make sure they get to the polls, make sure that they're active and that they not only get engaged, but that they stay engaged throughout the process and ultimately show up on Election Day.
But perhaps even more than their votes, the greatest value of young adults to both presidential campaigns may be their sweat.
I think they're important for campaigning purposes, going door to door, trying to get support. I think it's important that everyone should vote, so that's how young people are important. But as for the overall turnout, historically, things don't tend to change overnight.
They're very important because they obviously can provide a lot of foot soldiers. They can sometimes work during the day between classes when some of us are at work doing, our regular jobs. So absolutely, I mean, they're very important, and the campaign is doing a very serious effort to try to bring them in, make them part of the campaign.
Virginia's a big swing state, and this is the first time in over 40 years where Virginia actually has a chance of going blue. Yeah, rain or shine every day, as long as there's no hurricane.
The national group Rock the Vote says it expects young voter turnout to rise this year, as it has the last two presidential cycles, but still hover around 50%.
On our website, you can ask NewsHour regulars Amy Walter and Stu Rothenberg your questions on the final push to November 4th. As always, just go to pbs.org and then scroll down to NewsHour Reports. And finally tonight, some depression lessons. This week marks the 79th anniversary of the stock market crash of 1929. Our economics correspondent Paul Salmon had a conversation about that recently.
At the Museum of American Finance on Wall Street, we sat down with Eugene White and author Amity Shlaes for a historical look at the Great Depression. He's an economist who generally admires FDR's handling of the crisis. She's the author of The Forgotten Man, critical of 1930s government intervention.
Eugene White, Amity Shlaes, welcome. 1933, President Roosevelt is about to take office. Depth of the Great Depression. Where do we seem to be with respect to that moment in history?
Well, if we compare the circumstances around it, it looks very scary because there are a lot of similarities. Those include fallen asset markets, a collapse of the stock market, of real estate markets, and a credit crunch with a lot of banks going under. If we say what's it going to look like when the new president takes office compared to when Roosevelt assumes office, I think the circumstances are very different. In 1933, there had been a great hesitancy from policymakers, from both the Fed and the Treasury, to do much about it. And that was one of the things which had caused the Depression to accelerate downwards. The difference is today we've seen a lot of quick action by both the Fed and the Treasury to address a lot of these issues. So a lot of things which took a long time to happen afterwards, which were delayed in the 1930s, have already taken place, an easing particularly of Fed and an increase of deficit spending.
So Roosevelt takes over, and what does he do? And how does he sort of get the country back on the upswing?
When he comes in, he does a lot of good things. One is to establish deposit insurance. We talk about that today. Another is to sort out the banks with the bank holiday. We see people doing that now. Very quickly he did it, and it was a rather bipartisan affair. The men said you couldn't tell which party the people were, except for you knew what side of the Treasury desk they were sitting on when they sorted out the banks. Began to create the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. That gave clarity to markets. And finally, of course, Roosevelt reassured through the radio, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, from the inaugural and then subsequently as well.
I would add one thing to that list of suggestions which were very important for confidence building. One of those is that at the time, the U.S. was on the gold standard. And that meant that the U.S. promised to exchange $20 and 35 cents for 1 ounce of gold. The problem was the U.S. was running out of gold very quickly. And what Roosevelt did was essentially allow the dollar to fall in value and to revalue gold ultimately at $35 an ounce. That had a tremendous impact because all of a sudden all the gold in Fort Knox and the Treasury rose in value. The Treasury was richer, so the Treasury created these gold certificates it deposited with the Fed and spent. And so it acted as an enormous stimulus to the economy.
One of the things, though, I describe in The Forgotten Man is that Roosevelt was experimenting. They didn't really understand the gold standard then, even as well as it was just described. So he said, okay, I'm going to add money to the economy. I'm going to inflate somehow. I'll set the gold price every morning at breakfast after I have my egg and my cigarette with Mr. Morgenthau in attendance because he always says yes.
He's the Treasury
Secretary. He
Secretary.
was to become the Treasury Secretary, and he did set it every day, trying in sort of experimental way, let's drive prices up, let's help farmers, and he would be quite arbitrary. He'd say, let it go up 21 cents, and Morgenthau would say, why, Mr. President? He'd say, because it's 7 times 3, and 3 is a lucky number. And Morgenthau later wrote, if anyone knew how we did this, they would be frightened. And they were. You do see the stock market, for example, leveling off, staying at about 100 from a big rally in the spring the rest of the year. There was an arbitrary aspect to the New Deal that was deeply destructive, and that's an important point to make as well. Those New Yorker cartoons of people waiting it out in their living room crying into their martini were accurate. Capital waited for the experiment to end.
The economics profession says that theoretically, and certainly said in those days, no, hey, prices will come down, wages will come down, markets will clear, that is, people will start buying stuff at a lower price, and the situation will reverse itself. But that didn't happen.
The problem was that here there was much larger deflation and there were some very bad imbalances in the economy. And deflation played into those, so that people were largely in debt. There were a lot of indebtedness, much higher than at previous levels. So that fall in prices was much more severe.
Why would the fall in prices be difficult if you were?
Because if you have a loan, and you have to pay that back $100.
Right.
If the price level falls, that increases the real value of that loan you have to pay back.
And
that makes it costly. Yes.
Like with houses now.
That's
you mean
correct.
If I've got a mortgage and I'm paying and the value of the house is going down, then this becomes
a greater burden. And it wasn't just the price of housing, it was the price of all goods. So that's going down. So anyone who had borrowed found the burden much higher. And that created not only foreclosures, but defaults on a very broad level, creating much greater distress than you'd had in previous occasions.
I also see the deflation as problematic. Inflation is friendly to risk takers. America is a risk-taking economy. When you have an idea, you're young, you're trying something out, you're in debt. Those people were punished, and that sourness we live with today in our grandparents and great-grandparents, anyone who was risky and fun, but maybe also an inventor, he lost out. The conservative people won out, the ones who saved and didn't dare. So that's a cultural layover that we still have.
Yeah, this always reminds me of the credit comes from the Latin credere, to believe. In your book, you have a quote from the British Prime Minister of the 19th century, Gladstone.
Credit is suspicion asleep. And that suspicion was very awake in this period. It's also very awake now.
Now, what lessons should we have learned from the Great Depression, and have we learned them?
What I discovered researching the period was that government intervention was usually problematic and made the Depression worse in Hoover's era and also in FDR's era. So we want to be a little wary now about always asking for one more rescue package. The uncertainty of the rescue packages and their timing can do damage itself.
But you're not saying, or are you, that government intervention in general actually was worse than if government had done nothing at all?
Government should have done less.
I would have to disagree with that interpretation. It's quite true that there were a lot of mistakes made during the Great Depression in terms of government policy, but those are primarily mistakes about intervening in specific markets, about fooling around with a pricing mechanism affecting prices and wages. Those were clear mistakes. But what we really learned about was how the Fed should act as a central bank, how it should act as a lender of last resort, and how to operate fiscal policy in a sensible way to counteract the effects of a stock market crash, to counteract the effects of a recession. Those are very, very important lessons which are actually being used today. And it's no surprise, I guess I would say we're relatively lucky, to have people at the Fed who have a thorough understanding of the Great Depression.
Amity Shlaes, Eugene White, thank you very much.
Again, the major developments of this day. The government reported economic activity fell in the third quarter. It was the clearest sign yet the country is moving into recession. Wall Street shook off the news and rallied on cuts in interest rates. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained nearly 190 points. And in the presidential campaign, Republican John McCain criticized Democrat Barack Obama for backing tax breaks for oil companies. Obama said bad news about the economy would only continue under McCain. And once again to our honor roll of American service personnel killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. We add them as their deaths are made official and photographs become available. Here in silence are 13 more. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Mark Shields and David Brooks, among others. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lara is provided by
oil, energy, the environment. Where are the answers? This isn't a liberal or conservative issue. It's a human issue. As an energy company, Chevron has a great...
Vote no on Sizemore's measures 58, 60, and 64.
Halloween is just around the corner, but so are the terrific savings at Bi-Mart. The trick is having enough treats, so stock up. You'll find all your favorites and some for the kids, too. This year, treat yourself to terrific savings at Bi-Mart, just right for Halloween.
I'm a Democrat, but I vote for the best candidate.
I'm a Republican, but I want the right to vote for a Democrat if I want to.
I'm an independent, and I just want to be able to vote in the primary elections.
Measure 65 opens Oregon's primaries so every voter can choose the best candidate regardless of party affiliation. Measure 65. Open primaries empower every voter with real choice.
Vote yes on 65.
Open primaries.
That's fair.
Paid for by Yes on 65.
It's Crown Carpet's Super Warehouse Sale. Your chance to save 20, 30, even 40% on carpet for your home. You'll find hundreds of colors and styles to choose from. In stock and ready for immediate installation. Don't miss the Super Warehouse Sale at both big stores. Crown Carpets.
A message about Jeff Merkley from Barack Obama.
Oregon, you have a choice. Do you stick with the failed Washington policies that put CEOs and special interests first, or do you choose real change? That change is Jeff Merkley. Jeff will put fairness back in the system and strengthen our economy by cutting taxes for the middle class, not corporations who ship our jobs overseas. With Jeff Merkley in the U.S. Senate, we can get our country back on track.
I'm Jeff Merkley, and I approve this message.
K2 News, first at 4, weekday afternoons.